Go ahead and get us started here. There might be a few other folks who end up joining us, but we've got so much to get through tonight. I want to make sure that we are respectful of everyone's time. For those of you who don't know me, I do see a lot of familiar faces, so that's wonderful. My name is Jessie Frank, and I am the program manager here at IJPC. I manage our anti-death penalty work, as well as our peace and nonviolence work. IJPC's mission is to educate and advocate for peace, challenge unjust local, national, and global systems, and work for the creation of a more nonviolent society. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Intercommunity Justice and Peace Center, we are in Cincinnati. We're in the Over the Rhine area in the Peaslee Neighborhood Center, and we've been around for a little over 35 years. So we've been doing this work for a long time, and I am so proud to be standing on the shoulders of all of the people who did this work before me. So we're really glad to have you here tonight. The Nonviolence Alliance is the program that is presenting tonight's event to all of you. NVA, as that's how we abbreviate it. NVA was started around 3 years ago. Father John Deere is a Catholic priest who came and inspired our community to sort of imagine what Cincinnati could look like if it really took the call of nonviolence seriously. And so ever since then, NVA has been trying to see what we can do on a local scale to, remind our entire community about nonviolence, and that is really what we should be striving for. And we have been trying to do that by creating this inclusive and diverse alliance of individuals as well as organizations and businesses that are committed to this same vision of creating this nonviolent community. And another goal of ours as the Nonviolence Alliance is to create space for education, to educate ourselves and the public about active nonviolence. And so we've been hosting these Awake and Act events throughout the pandemic as a way to look at some different social justice issues in the context of violence and nonviolence. A lot of what we've done so far has focused on police brutality and racial justice efforts here in our city. Because last summer when we started doing these, that was really where all of our energy was focused. I think in Cincinnati and around the country, we were taking a really critical look at our police departments. And so we've been really happy to learn more about that as a group, I think. But I am so excited for tonight's presentation because we're moving in a different direction, looking at environmental violence, which I think is maybe not an obvious form of violence for some people, but it's definitely present, and it's not one of IJPC's core issues. We focus on immigration, human trafficking, the death penalty, and then peace and nonviolence, which includes some racial justice work. But I think, we can't do everything, but this is definitely something that we care so deeply about. And so I'm really glad that we're able to make space for those issues that we don't have time to focus on every single day through events like this. So just a quick overview of the agenda. I'm going to hand it off to our presenters in just a few minutes. We'll have time for question and answer after they present. So if anything comes up during the presentation, just write it down and save it till the end. Following the Q&A, we will have a quick small group discussion. We'll break out into groups and then chat again as a large group and send you all on your way. So without anything else, I will hand it off to Mary to start introductions of our presenters.
Hey everyone, just so honored to be here. I had history with Sister Andrea Coverman and Paul starting the NVA, and Andrea was a mentor, one of the first people that I worked with, and I just feel so blessed to be here and sharing this information. So, as well as these amazing people here with me today, Ben and Kelly and Kelsey, and I will let them introduce themselves as well. I'm with the Buckeye Environmental Network now, and I do statewide organizing around the petrochemical hub and brine spreading and all these issues related to petrochemicals. I am also with the Ohio Poor People's Campaign, and I just recently am on the steering committee of Sierra Club Ohio as an environmental and social justice chair. So that's what I'm up to, and I'll pass it off to Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Mary, and hi, everyone. My name is Ben Hunkler, and since, August of 2020, I've been helping concerned Ohio River residents fight against petrochemical development and fracking in the Ohio River Valley, and the environmental violence each of those things create. I'm really jazzed to be with you all tonight, and I'll pass it over to Kelly.
Yeah, thanks, Ben and Mary. So hi, I'm Kelly Yagatich. I'm with the Climate Reality Project. So I'm a regional organizer on our petrochemical campaign in the Ohio River Valley. So working in Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, and a little bit into Kentucky. I'm based in Pittsburgh, and I'm really thankful to be here and thankful that I get the opportunity to work with so many great people up and down the river, and feeling thankful for Zoom that I can join you guys from my home all the way up here at the top of the Ohio River. So I'll pass it over to Kelsey.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having us. I'm Kelsey McNaul. I'm also a regional organizer for the Climate Reality Project. So I work alongside Kelly and do all the things that she said she does. So we have similar introductions there, but I'm also just really excited to be here and excited to see the way that y'all are tying these issues together. It's so important. So maybe we'll pass it to Mary now to get started.
Yeah, and I see some familiar faces. So I know some of you kind of know what's going on, and hopefully we'll provide some updates. And then I have put the presentation in the chat, so you should have access to it and you'll be able to follow along. If you have any trouble with that, let me know.
Another thing to add about the presentation in the chat, there are some links in the presentation, so some action alerts. So you can those links are live when you visit the presentation.
All right. So some of you have seen this presentation. We have actually kind of changed the format a little bit to shorten it and to make it more conducive to this kind of action alert type presentation. So Awake and Act Environmental Violence in the Ohio River Valley. So around the idea around the Poor People's Campaign of understanding that environmental violence, that includes racism, that includes poverty, that includes militarism, and it includes what we call the corrupt moral narrative of religious nationalism, which allows, for me, it's the root cause of why this violence exists. And someone helped me understand a new definition I've been using of violence as a lack of love. And so if you think about it, just anything that causes violence means there's no love there, right? So anything that allows these corporations to create sacrifice zones where people they're dehumanized, that's violence, that's direct violence. And so what we're here today is to help understand that environmental violence means, it's direct violence to people in so many different forms. It's not just environmental. So environmental harm and systemic violence, pollution is violence. Militarism. These companies come in and they promise the moon, building new schools and you know, providing, you know, you've seen Dark Waters, the movie Dark Waters, and you know, whole towns are built on these industries, and they promise, and they do provide jobs, right? They do provide all these things, but the cost benefit is not. There's studies that are coming out that are showing that the cost benefit is not, it doesn't add up. So these companies come in and they raise the rents. So the people that have been living there all their lives are now pushed out. That's violence, right? And so there's all these hidden forms of violence that are caused, but because of these corrupt moral narratives that get pushed around, you know, the money that these companies are going to bring, but they don't look at the violence and the cost of all the other ramifications of what these companies do. There's a study that just came out, and Kelsey, where is that link you mentioned? Is it on this slide?
Yeah, so the
body of
study
burden
is linked in the body burden. Yeah,
okay.
I can also put the link in the chat.
Okay, so the body of burden is a study that just came out. It studied some families in Pennsylvania, in environmental health science. Put that out, and it's everything we knew, right? It's just basically shows up like all the chemicals, all these things that we knew was gonna happen. It just proves it. And so it's shocking, it's depressing, it's horrible. And so we are really trying to push all this information out there to really counteract the narratives around these companies that try and say that they're all the benefits. So we need to really educate people about those issues. So, and now I will pass it on to Kelsey.
Yeah, so I included this picture of Cancer Alley. I wasn't sure like whether to include it in like the facilities section of the presentation or here in the introduction about violence, but I think that all of the issues that Mary was speaking to in terms of environmental violence and all of the hidden costs and issues have been so epitomized by just the issues in Cancer Alley, Louisiana. So along the Mississippi River between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, there is a large section of, or that section of the river has a very high concentration of different refineries and petrochemical facilities. And the region is known as another name of Cancer Alley or Death Alley. So the rates of cancer, of heart disease, of respiratory illness are just off the charts in these communities. And it's primarily Black and Brown communities living in Louisiana suffering these impacts. And so it's just another example of the interplay of poverty and racism with environmental violence. And I think, Mary, you maybe there's one more slide then, or if you wanted to add anything. Mary, you're on mute.
Sorry. So the state of violence and right to nonviolent protest. April 10th, there is a statewide action that's being coordinated around, there's 4 anti-protest bills that are at the State House. They've already passed SB 33, which basically felonized protesting and will make organizations that are get connected to any type of protest that is deemed inappropriate or whatever, well, you know, they'll allow those organizations to be sued. So that's SB 33. It's around the critical infrastructure. These bills came from ALEC, which is an organization that produces mass bills and ships them out to all the states to get passed, basically. And it came from Standing Rock. You know, they saw the power of the people and they got scared. So they created these anti-protest bills. And so now they got SB 33 passed, and now there's 4 more bills. And basically just takes away all of our rights. So it's another form of taking our freedom of speech, and they basically have to cheat to win. The link there, Stop Ohio Anti-Protest Bills, there at the bottom is a link to the action, and there is an action being planned in Cincinnati, and just look there for more information. So. Oh, it's not advancing, sorry. Not sure why. Oops, now it's, I guess it's slow. Sorry.
You're good.
All right.
Yeah, so I think we wanted to start off just with a really broad overview of like how environmental issues and nonviolence are connected, but now we can take it a little more local and connect these things to the direct work that Mary, Kelly, and Ben and I are doing. So we organize around the proposed petrochemical build out of the Ohio River Valley. So that's what has brought Kelly and I in Pittsburgh together with folks in Ohio and West Virginia. So this picture here is just a small snippet of what this could look like. And so basically, and remembering that picture of Cancer Alley, so Cancer Alley, there's a large network, like I said, of refineries and facilities and pipelines. And a lot of that is used to produce oil, but also plastic. And so essentially the industry is looking, sorry, my dog just knocked something off. The industry is looking to create another petrochemical hub in the Ohio River Valley. And in a way, it's really ironic. Some people have said that the petrochemical industry, in a way, is a climate refugee, despite the fact that they're one of the main perpetrators of greenhouse gas emissions, but that they're, because of the flooding and storms in the Gulf South, that there's a need to locate these facilities in a more stable climate, and also somewhere that is has a really steady supply of fracked gas, which is in our area. And so on this map is a little bit dated. There's kind of new proposals coming in and out all the time, but it's been said that the region could hold 5 large petrochemical facilities, or they're called cracker plants, which produce small little pellets of plastic that can be molded into single-use plastic like bags and things. But there was a proposal for 5 different facilities. The one in Beaver County, the ethane cracker there, that one is being built. And then there's one proposed in Ohio, or the Ohio ethylene plant. I believe that's the PPT Global plant. And so those 2 are still a little more relevant. The other ones I think are still more, they've been proposed, but there hasn't been much moving on them. But essentially this whole region is going to be connected through fracking and pipelines to produce plastic. And yeah, I'll go to the next slide. Maybe.
Sorry, it's slow. It's like, it's not behaving.
You're good.
Sorry. Maybe I should get it out of presentation mode. Is that the next one? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So just a little more on fracking, just so like we can all be on the same page. So like I was saying, like this build out, this network of facilities, it's all dependent on the extraction of shale gas. And so to do that, the process is called fracking, where you drill into the ground and then you essentially pump a lot of its water, its chemicals, and sand into the ground at extremely high pressures, and it cracks the shale formation and releases the natural gas inside, and then it like slurps back up. And that's not a very good scientific explanation there, but for the purposes of this presentation, some things that are really important. So fracking, because of the way that it disturbs the ground, it can cause earthquakes, which can really hurt communities. The chemicals that go into fracking, there's a lot of really toxic and nasty chemicals. And then also the wastewater that comes back up after you pump all of those things down is also highly radioactive. So it's natural radioactivity that was underground. And again, my science on this isn't super firm, but essentially when the wastewater comes back up to the surface, it's highly radioactive because it's bringing up radium and things that were buried deep underground. And so that has harm to the workers that are either hauling the wastewater or who are the communities that living nearby. It harms the water. It's just a pretty nasty process overall. And so it's really important to remember that another pipeline, another facility like is bad in itself, but it's also going to need more fracking. And so that's a huge harm. And you can, oh, nice. Okay. And like I said before too, I feel like it adds insult to injury just knowing that when like all of this fracking and this build out of the region and, you know, harming our Mother Earth, it's not to like, because some people say like, oh, we need natural gas. It keeps our homes warm in the winter. But in our region, primarily a lot of the natural gas, because of its components, actually is used to make plastics and petrochemicals. So a lot of that is going to be used to make single-use plastic, which we know is a crisis in of itself. And we can talk about the violence associated with that. But we could talk about that all night, just of the inequalities of people impacted by plastic pollution. But that's for another day. But then also too, I wanted to note that that there are, so the word petrochemical can also be used to include things like fertilizers and paints and some like synthetic material coatings. So it's not to power your homes and fuel your cars. It's for these things that we essentially don't need. And lastly, I spoke to some of these things before, but just some of the major facilities to be aware of that are kind of the biggest threats to our region right now. There's the shell cracker in Beaver County, then the PTTGC cracker plant that's proposed for Belmont County, Ohio. There's a proposal right now for a methanol plant in West Virginia, and then possibly up to 5 more, like I said. And then I will pass it to Ben, I believe.
Yeah, thanks, Kelsey. So yeah, I'm going to take a minute to talk a bit about a proposed revision to the Ohio State Implementation Plan. So just a few months ago, the PTTGC ethane cracker, which Kelsey just mentioned, asked the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency for a permit extension for their air permits. These permits were scheduled to expire just last month, but they asked Ohio EPA to revise Ohio law in order to extend their air permits through April 2022. The current Ohio law exists to keep us safe from air pollution. it allocates 30 months maximum from the date a permit is issued to the time a facility is allowed to start construction. And the reason why it creates that 30-month maximum is to make sure that these facilities comply with the most up-to-date air surveys, to make sure that they use the most cutting-edge pollution mitigation technology. So if this proposed revision to the Ohio State Implementation Plan is approved, it would allow major polluting facilities like the PTTGC plant and these other ethane crackers to automatically extend their air permits for the length of an appeal, which could range anywhere from 6 months to more than 3 years. And again, that's not just that's not just relevant to the PTTGC plant. That applies to all major polluting facilities in Ohio. So the reason why this matters is because if these facilities are using out-of-date air survey information, if they're not using the most cutting-edge technology to mitigate the pollution they're emitting into our atmosphere, that really puts local residents' health and safety at risk. And it's also just a gross and egregious abuse of power. The fact that PTTGC was able to ask our state regulatory agencies to, essentially do them a favor to extend their permits so that they can, build this facility without undergoing a new permit application, which would, it would take a lot of time, it would take a lot of money, it would delay the company's profits. That's terrible, and an example of environmental violence. So my organization, Concerned Ohio River Residents, is circulating an action alert, which is linked at the bottom of this slide, to tell the US EPA, which is the agency that would either approve or deny this legal change, to deny these indefinite permit extensions for major polluting facilities.
Being slow again, sorry.
No worries. I think I have the next slide. So I think thanks for that update on the SIP, Ben. And I really love this little meme here because I think this is a pretty, the SIP is definitely a pretty technical legal thing, but it's important to be thinking about how all of these things intersect. And I think to that point, as we wait to kind of get to the next slide, I think it's important to understand that this large petrochemical build out really is a network of different types of facilities, of different things. It's a full-time job to keep up with these things, and we all do this full-time and still can't keep up. So I think that it's, there's a lot of nuance here, but it's important to understand that these things really do impact the planet, but they also impact the people who have to live on the planet. They impact the workers, they impact the communities, and so when we're thinking about violence, we need to be thinking about the way in which the people are hurt, and the fabric of our communities and our neighborhoods and all of that stuff is really impacted. And so the next couple of slides that I'm going to talk through are about pipelines. And, Ben and Kelsey kind of laid out these cracker plants and these facilities that are going to be up and down the Ohio River and fracking, and what connects the well pads to these crackers are pipelines. So this industry often permits these facilities very piecemeal, right? So it's just one frac pad, it's just one pipeline, it's just one facility, but all of these things need to be connected, and all of these things require each other to operate. And so, their pipelines have kind of become the new trendy thing, right? With a lot of the protests around Dakota Access and the protests around, there's one in Memphis right now, the Byhalia pipeline, Line 3 in Minnesota. And, but there are a lot of concerning pipelines in the Ohio River Valley. And so you can see this picture here on the slide on the left. It is basically a scar on the side of the hill. From where a pipeline in September of 2019 exploded. So it was a natural gas liquids pipeline in Beaver County, Pennsylvania, not too far from where the proposed Shell ethane cracker is being built. And it destroyed a home, it destroyed a neighborhood, and it really left its mark. And so that pipeline was, I believe, in operation for only several days when the ground shifted and it exploded, destroying a home and a neighborhood. And it is now officially back online. nearly 2 years later. And so that's a little bit frightening. And there is a second pipeline that is being built that will cross the Revolution pipeline, which exploded here. And that pipeline, it'll cross in the area that the first one shifted and exploded. And so thinking about the impact that this has on our people and our communities really is violent. And so we can go to the next slide. And so the next kind of action item that we want to put on people's radar is the Shell Falcon pipeline. And so like we mentioned, the Shell ethane cracker is kind of the flagship project of this petrochemical hub. It's the only big cracker facility that is currently under construction. It's slated to be completed, I think, in early 2022. And the pipeline that would feed the cracker with ethane, which is the feedstock that it uses to turn into plastic, is called the Falcon. So it's a 90 some mile pipeline that runs from, there's a couple of different spaces, but it runs basically through Ohio and Pennsylvania. And it goes under the Ohio River and it carries ethane to this plant. And so there recently, as of like 2 weeks ago, an organization called Frac Tracker uncovered some documents basically that Shell had tried to cover up some instances of inadvertent returns during drilling, which means like spills and leaks. And basically workers were speaking out about their concerns around like potentially defective pipeline coatings, and they were being retaliated against. And so some of the people in our network wrote a letter to the Pipeline Hazardous Safety Material Agency, so PHMSA, basically asking them to investigate this further. And the Pennsylvania Attorney General is supposedly doing some kind of investigation into this, but I think to tie it again back to our violence issue, there is concerns, again, not only about people's water being impacted, which we'll talk a lot more about water in this presentation, but there's also concerns about the way in which workers are being retaliated against. So employer violence towards employees, I think that's a concern about the way they're being treated. And then also, concerns about potential explosions or leaks or things like that. And so I think, this is something that we'll want to keep on our radar, and there will probably be asks for people coming down the pike with this pipeline, but just to kind of, prime everyone to know that this is happening and it's concerning. And again, it is inherently violent, the way in which these projects take advantage of our communities, of our people, of workers, and really impact a lot of things. And so I will pass it back over to Mary.
All right, so fracking waste. Kelsey mentioned, when they drill down and then they bring this water back up, and the water they call it produced water or brine, and it's radioactive. And once they pull out all the gases that and the chemicals they need, you're left with this water. And it's what I'm just recently getting, more and more, learning more and more about. And so what do you do with this waste? Well, many states are saying they're passing laws because it's so harmful and so nasty that they're passing laws that they can't have, sorry. So they can't have this waste in their own states. So they're actually shipping it and sending it to Ohio, where they're taking it and they're putting it back into the ground, into these injection wells, what they call injection wells. And it's also going to be used to make the single-use plastics. So they're going to create storage facilities that go under the ground. There's other things they do with that. They use it on you've heard of brine spreading. They say, it's just salt water. Well, no, it's not just salt water. It's radioactive salt water. And they're spreading it on the ground because they think either one, it's going to take away the dust on these on dirt roads, which actually it doesn't. It actually winds up evaporating and going back up into the air, and it doesn't do what they say it does. Or they spread it on the roads to de-ice, which studies show it doesn't even work there. But the reason they use it is because it's free and it's cost effective, but it really doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And this really is, they've done tests on it and it is truly radioactive. So Buckeye Environmental Network, there are links here. You can go to get more information. There's brine spreading resolution that we are going to try and get passed in the different counties. But there's so many issues going on that we're constantly putting out these fires, and it takes us away from all these other things that we need to do. So we need lots of help to deal with all of these issues. There's this link here at the bottom. Radium Valley is a website that's put on by an impacted community, Coshocton, that is like ground zero for the brine spreading. And there's an amazing video at that link by Justin Noble, and he talks about the huge secret around the radioactiveness of natural gas and all these things that we're talking about. And I correlate it to the tobacco industry when they knew all these harms and they didn't tell anybody. Well, this is exactly what's happening with the oil and gas industry. All right, I'm trying to go to the next slide. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Mary, for that overview of injection wells. I think the next slide is me. I'm going to briefly touch upon a couple of injection wells that, again, my group Concerned Ohio River Residents is working against. The first of which is the Omni injection well, which is, it has been permitted and it's currently under construction in Belmont County, Ohio. We've been in touch with the community near the Omni injection well for months now, and it's just a nightmarish situation. There's truck traffic all hours of the day and night. These folks are suffering headaches, anxiety, sleep loss, and the injection hasn't even started yet. And we have also, interestingly, been in touch with the county commissioners of Belmont County, all of whom have historically been very pro-industry. And these folks, they came out in opposition to this injection well because, you know, there's no local economic benefit to injection wells. All of the money goes to the state. These communities aren't gaining income from injecting fracking waste underground. So, you know, everybody involved, everybody in the area has expressed opposition to this injection well, and it was permitted and has begun construction anyway. The second injection well is near Sardis, Ohio. That one is currently, its permit is currently under consideration. So there's another action alert at the bottom of the slide, which I'll put in the chat in a second. We are, you know, we're working on a campaign to mobilize folks to submit concerns about the second injection well near Sardis to the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. We're trying to get it stopped. So I will go ahead and put that in the chat. And yeah, so barging frac waste. So as you can see in this map on the top right hand of your screen, there are 3 facilities across the Ohio River that have proposed a network of barging, loading and offloading facilities to transport this toxic radioactive fracking waste along the Ohio River. Excuse me. And let's see, Deep Rock, which is the one, the orange tag in the middle of the Ohio River, it has begun transporting fracking waste as of the first quarter of 2021. And as Mary mentioned, the wastewater that comes from fracking is a mixture of, you know, proprietary chemicals and naturally occurring radioactive materials that are extracted from the ground. So when you shoot this wastewater deep underground to extract oil and gas, it hits all these, radionuclides, radium-226 and radium-228, and pulls them out of the ground with it. And the potential, the potential consequences of transporting this stuff across the river are catastrophic. It just takes one spill to unload potentially hundreds of barrels of this radioactive fracking waste into the Ohio River. And what's horrifying is that, regional water treatment facilities don't have the capacity, they don't have the technological capability to remove that radioactive material from the water. So if there were to be a spill at any point during the loading process, the offloading process, the transportation process, the consequences are just unimaginable. We don't know what would happen because we have no capacity to remove that radioactivity from our water, our drinking water. If you could go to the next slide, Mary, when it loads. Thank you. All right, the Mountaineer Natural Gas Liquid Storage Facility it's a critical part. It's kind of one of the fulcrums of the larger petrochemical build out of Appalachia. So this facility would store 3.25 million gallons of flammable, highly explosive natural gas liquids, which include ethane, propane, and butane in these salt caverns alongside the Ohio River. It would also create pipelines running underneath the Ohio River to transport these, again, highly explosive flammable materials. The reason why this facility has been proposed for construction is because it would essentially provide ethane storage for the ethane crackers. It would allow them to run continuously. Without a storage facility, these crackers would have to rely on the ethane extraction process, it can be kind of sporadic and intermittent. It doesn't always, there isn't a constant stream of ethane coming from these fracking wells. And it's, the consequences of this project could also be just absolutely tremendous. Other natural gas liquid storage facilities in Texas and Oklahoma have seen catastrophic fires and explosions that have resulted in deaths and property damage. Groundwater contamination is a huge risk. When you're pumping these natural gas liquids deep underground, you just never know how permeable the barriers of these salt caverns could be. If these liquids were to escape and get into our drinking water supplies, we don't know what could happen. So a few months ago, we mobilized more than 1,000 local residents to submit their concerns about this facility to the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. We also had a technical expert submit 58 comments outlining technical problems with the facility's permit application. This includes, the fact that the application doesn't provide any proof that this facility wouldn't contaminate local groundwater supplies. The application doesn't have any sort of contingency plan, a backup plan in case something like that were to happen. There's no outline of how spills would be cleaned up. And just last week, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources issued a draft permit for the facility anyway. And their draft permit didn't address 42 of our technical concerns with the permit application. And we don't know what that means. We don't know if that means that, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources just doesn't have answers to these questions. And we're really concerned about what this project could mean for both local communities and for the 5 million people who rely on the Ohio River for drinking water.
Yeah, and I'll just add, we are looking for people, and I forgot to add that information. We're trying to get people to send emails to the Ohio Department of Natural Resources like every day and ask them, why aren't you answering these? And these are basic safety concerns. They're not like anything out of the ordinary. So if you are interested in signing up to email that, maybe put your name in the chat and just say, I'll email or something, and then we'll get your name and I can send you all the information that you need to be able to do that. Is this the next? Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the next slide. And so there's a short video on this slide, but for the sake of time, I think that we'll skip it and people can watch it later. You guys have the slides. It's a very short kind of overview. But yeah, so with all of that, everyone's probably feeling really depressed, right? There's a lot happening. It's all pretty negative. Doesn't really sound that great. But there are some positives. And you know, there are some things that we're thinking about, ways to address this, ways to move forward, ways to really engage community members and to provide a better vision for our region and for our communities. And so one of the things that we're working on and that we're hoping to do is, a few years ago, there was a conference up in, I believe, Wheeling, called Better Vision for the Valley, thinking about alternative economic development to petrochemicals. And there's a growing movement out of southwestern Pennsylvania, which started called Reimagine, which has morphed into a larger regional effort to try to get federal investment in sustainable infrastructure development in our region. But essentially the idea is that we're always coming into communities saying, we don't want this, we don't want this, we don't want this. And we're not presenting the alternative, what we do want. What do we want to see in our communities, in our neighborhoods? What, you know, Mary was talking about how violence is the lack of love. Like, this is, you know, the love that we want to see. Like, how do we love each other? How do we make sure that our neighbors have family sustaining jobs and our kids have healthy, clean environments to grow up in, and all of these things. And so a project that we're working on in coordination with CORE and a lot of other partners is a follow-up to this Better Vision for the Valley conference that happened a couple of years ago. So that's hopefully going to be in May, where we're talking about potential ideas for something different to put on the proposed site of the PPTG cracker in Belmont County. So that is that's something that's coming down the pike and something that we can keep everyone posted about when it comes up. And then I can pass it over to Mary for some other positive news to close us out.
All right, so something I've recently been involved with, and I think if John is still on the call, John was involved in just recently a Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act was introduced. And there's an organization called Break Free from Plastic, and it's an incredible national, worldwide organization. And this is a bill that is very comprehensive. If you go to the link, if you click on the link at the top or in red, it'll bring you to and give you all the information you need about the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. It's comprehensive, it's cradle to grave. It tackles so many of the issues that it's doable. It probably won't pass as it is, but there's a lot of momentum around it, and we're really excited. And again, it's something positive. And
for my water. I'm listening to an end of a meeting.
And so recently we did a light action where we projected some messages on Paul Brown Stadium, and then it was part of a nationwide act to try and get excitement and momentum around this Plastic Pollution Act. So highly recommend it. Try and, you know, let our representatives know that we want this bill to pass. And then at the bottom, you'll see a link, Cincinnati Water Protectors March in Solidarity with Stop Line 3. That's a link to the Facebook event for Friday at noon. They are one of our groups that we work intimately with around all of these issues, and we need to talk about violence. You know, they've been they're the first ones to have suffered violence historically, and we want to support them in their efforts because you know, all these issues are connected, all these pipelines are connected, and we just want to make sure that we're showing up in these spaces to support them. So, I've put our information here So if you want to get a hold of any of us. And then this last slide here has a whole bunch of information. And if you go through any of that and still have questions, feel free to reach out. And I think that's about it.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful and covered so many different things. Before we get into questions, I just want to say out loud that I will send an email that has a recording of this presentation and the PowerPoint slides, and I can put some of those action links directly into the email. So if you can't find them in the PowerPoint, you can access them. Okay, so it's about 8:25. I think maybe we can spend 10 to 15 minutes on questions, and then I'd love to open us up for a smaller group conversation about the material. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand or type the question into the chat, and then I can just call on you to ask it.
I have a question. I am a member of the Citizens Climate Lobby, and of course, we're very interested in putting a fee on carbon. And I really appreciate what you all are doing because it's more rapid than a fee on carbon. But what do you think about putting a fee on carbon and perhaps returning that dividend to the American people so that lower socioeconomic groups are not disadvantaged?
I unfortunately am not well versed in that topic. I know I've heard some different issues around it, as far as how it can impact, I think, truly impact. And I'm curious if Ben or Kelsey or Kelly do not have an answer. I see Guy is on, not to put him on the spot, or Claire that might know, or anybody else that's here that has, but I guess maybe we'll go with if Ben or Kelsey or Kelly first, and then if not, then someone else can answer.
I'm happy to start, Elizabeth. I'm not an expert on carbon fees, but I think that we have to be careful with them, personally speaking. I think that, we really have to ensure that any dividend from a carbon fee is progressively reallocated, and make sure that it does, go to folks who need it. My one concern with the carbon fee is that it it allows the petrochemical industry to persist, and these huge fossil fuel corporations can very easily just buy right to pollute. But aside from that, it is certainly a step in the right direction.
It seems as though climate scientists and economists agree that this would be the plan that would be the most effective in lowering CO2 emissions. And certainly if we made plastic more expensive, it would begin to hurt.
That's a great point. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, the immediate reduction of CO2 emissions is invaluable. Yeah.
I can chime in, and I really don't know much at all about the carbon fee. So sorry to not be able to totally answer your question, but I do think something else to note when we're thinking about the petrochemical industry is that a lot of the emissions that come from fracking aren't CO2 necessarily, they're methane. So methane is like a very large concern that really isn't addressed with the carbon fee and dividend. So, I mean, there are concerns around like carbon emissions from cracker plant facilities. There's concerns around like diesel truck emissions and all of that. But just something to think about is that methane is really a big issue here. And I don't really know how that is addressed with the carbon fee.
One thing I can add to that as well, I'm also not an expert. I believe the Indigenous Environmental Network they may have some kind of resource or web page I know that there has been some resistance to the carbon fee and dividend model within the Indigenous community. And so I think that there are folks in that community that could speak to concerns around that legislation as well better than I could.
I have a question. The Cincinnati Water Protection March on April 2nd, where does it begin? And could you tell us where this Line 3 pipeline, where it goes? What does it cross? What territory does it go through?
Okay, I'm looking at the events. Let's see. Looks like it's 313 Walnut Street is where it is going to start. And I'll read the event description. It says solidarity action with the movement to stop Line 3 and the Dakota Access Pipeline. The action will tour through the banks financing Enbridge, including Bank of America and Chase. The march will close at the federal building where the Army Corps of Engineers office is located. Cincinnati joins dozens of cities across the US taking action to stop Line 3. There will be short stops at each location where speakers and activities will occur. So it's basically through the Dakotas and Minnesota, I believe. It's from what I understand. And look, Jessie has a flyer. So she'll share that. And then I'm going to put in the chat a link for those of you who wanted to sign up to email the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. And you don't have to limit it to just that one issue. There's several issues that you can share your thoughts on too, maybe in a separate email. And if this document does not have enough information for you to do what you need to do, then let me know. But it should spell it out.
Well, I have maybe part question, part comment. One is that the April 2nd date, of course, is Good Friday. And we probably have many of us, things to do on Good Friday, in addition to marching. You know, there's several walks going on around Cincinnati in terms of justice and peace and Good Friday, one of which IJPC is a sponsor of, a Good Friday Way of the Cross. So it's not as coordinated as it probably would have been beneficial to be. And then my angle on the whole plastics thing is that it's a matter of supply and demand. That the supply is what you've been all talking about with the pollution that happens on the production end of plastics with the fracking and cracking and plants and all of that. And that's a political angle to take. And I think it's important to work on that level. But I get torn between how much of my energy to put on that political prevent it at the source end and how much to put on the supply end. And the supply end has to do with how do we buy less plastics, use less single-use plastics, and so that the more pressure that could come on the petrochemical industry to not have the demand for it because we aren't using them. And I think that's a whole huge other area of involvement that it's good to link together. It's not, the supply is important that we stop the pollution at its source, but part of the way to do that is to reduce the demand for it through not purchasing single-use plastics. More comment than question. What are you?
I'll share with you that absolutely, right? You know, we have to do both. But unfortunately, the certain companies have made it look like it's our responsibility, right? So we have to stop it at it. That this is what I've realized, that at least I believe, that we have to stop the production at its source to get them to change. They're not going to change. People like, you know, these companies are not going to change unless we, you know, make it so it's very difficult for them to produce the plastics in the first place. You know, at least that's one tactic. Of course, we have to do all these other things. Only 8 to 9% of all the plastic in the world is recycled, right? The recycling, that's a gimmick that was created basically to make us believe that we can keep producing plastic. Now, do we have to recycle? Absolutely. Does the Plastic Pollution Act help increase recycling? Absolutely. So, you know, and again, with the carbon, you know, thing we were talking about before, it's not just one answer. It's all of these things. And it takes us all working on all the different parts to make it. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add really quickly, because Susan, I think I've shared some of those similar thoughts before. And Mary, what you were saying, I think I've heard it explained before as if, you know, like these massive multi-billion-dollar industries are creating reduce, reuse, recycle as this reverse psychology to put the blame on us as consumers. When clearly we do have consumer power, right? But we are also not necessarily the creators of this problem. Like, you know, all of us recycling would pale in comparison to these industries stopping what they're doing. So I think yes, and right, I think is exactly what Mary's saying. And I appreciate you bringing that up.
So Jess, one of the things that I would say to that is there a group that I feel oftentimes unable to take any significant steps to reduce my plastic intake? It's everywhere. It drives me crazy. I agree with you. Recycling, it doesn't seem to be the answer, but I would like to see a more definitive group that says, here are very clear steps over a period of months that you could draw and go to this store and this store. This is how you could do this with grocery. This is how you could do it with this. I haven't seen that. Now, maybe it's out there. So it's a complex picture.
Well, the Break Free from Plastics movement is doing a lot of that. That's one organization.
Thank you, Susan.
I think too, something that I'll add, and yeah, Break Free from Plastics, so they're a network of organizations. So there's like, I don't know how many organizations involved in Break Free from Plastic, but they tackle plastic pollution like the whole life cycle, right? So it's important to be thinking about, you know, the production of it at the fracking well, but it's also important to be thinking about it at the end. And so there's a lot of groups who work on different audits of brands and things like that, working with different grocery stores. And you can really do your education. And I think to your point, Susan, about like reducing your own individual plastic footprint, yes, it's super important, right? To be thinking about how we can like individually use less plastic. But my stance on it has been, even if I go to a restaurant and I say no straw, that straw was still made and that straw is still out here in the world and it's still going to end up in the ocean somewhere, right? And I think at this point, you know, one individual action like definitely makes a difference and it makes a statement and it shows other people. But the problem is so large that, you know, me cutting back on my individual plastic doesn't necessarily make as much of an impact as needs to be made. And I think the thing to highlight too is that the oil and gas industry is really pushing to keep us dependent on plastic. So in Ohio, I believe they passed a law that is like a preemption on bans of plastic bags. So basically the state of Ohio banned communities from banning plastic bags. Why did that happen? Because the oil and gas industry lobby has the ear of our legislators and because they want us to continue to buy these products so they can make money. And so, you know, things like that inhibit us from making any type of difference by like saying we don't want plastic bags because the plastic bags are still being made because we're not allowed to ban them. So I think we need to think about it like that as well. Like, yes, don't use the straw. Yes, take your own bags to the grocery store, but you know, also it's important to think about the larger system here.
Yes.
One thing I've been thinking about lately also is that if we have the fortune to have mutual funds, we need to divest from plastics and from fossil fuels.
I'd like to ask a question, and I have an observation also. First of all, I think I want to clarify. I think I heard that ban that was passed by the Ohio State Legislature was only for 1 year. Is that correct, Mary? You're up on that, right? 1 year.
Yeah.
So right now there's a push for the Cincinnati City Council to revisit that issue because they had passed a ban for Cincinnati and then it got stopped by the state legislature. So now you're putting pressure again on the Cincinnati City Commission, which I can't do because I'm in Kentucky, but you know, I'm supporting you. And then I want to make the point that the more people begin to understand, and I don't think there's nearly enough understanding and public information on this. I think the more people understand the harmful health effects of plastic and ethane and brine and radioactivity and all those things, which, you know, last fall and through in the summer, we had a series of A to Z plastics, impacts of plastics. You know, it was a wonderful presentation. But how many people know that? How many people really know how that plastic is affecting them? That it's in our blood, it's in our uterus, it's babies in utero, it's everywhere. It's in our brain and the effects of that. And my second point is there's still so much, these corporations just exaggerate the number of jobs they say they're going to produce. And we know from studying this issue that they never materialize, or if they offer a certain number of jobs, it may be just for a year and then they're gone. And then it's a very small nucleus of workers. So if we can dispel that myth about the jobs, that will help also. So I just wanted to make those 2 points about the health and the jobs. Thank you.
Can I jump off Mary Joyce's point? For those who work with communities like Ben, going in and working with the communities, you know, who are impacted by these like local injection wells, what are people's like first response when you or your organization show up and you're like, they're building this thing, this is some of the outcomes, or, you know, you should be, you know, we're asking for petitions against the permit. Like, what are people's first response? Because these are in like rural communities where, you know, the knowledge of the impact, you know, you're the ones bringing the knowledge of the impact. Like, so what are people's responses in these communities?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, it's easy to generalize, but typically the first question we get is, you know, what about the jobs? People always ask about the jobs, and people tend to accept the environmental and public health harms of fracking and petrochemical development as a necessary sacrifice for jobs and economic prosperity. And I'll also take this opportunity to plug a report that recently came out from another organization that I'm associated with called the Ohio River Valley Institute. And they took a look at the most productive fracking counties in Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania from the start of the fracking boom until 2019, right before COVID-19 hit, to really drill down on those claims that these petrochemical projects and that fracking were going to bring all these jobs to our communities and bring local prosperity to these towns that had long been depressed from extractive industries. And this report found that as a whole, jobs, personal income, and populations actually declined in nearly all of those fracking counties. And so that report has really become almost like a weapon to us to kind of dispel that myth that fracking and petrochemical development are the, not only are they sources of economic prosperity, but the myth that they're the only source of economic prosperity in the region that has just relied upon extractive industry for generations and generations. And I'll go ahead and put a link to that report in the chat. But yeah, that's a fantastic question. And dispelling that myth is something that just constantly plagues us and is something that we're, really working toward. So thanks for that question.
And oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Sorry,
Go ahead, Kelly.
Taking up a lot of space answering some of these questions, but I think, Rachel, that's a super great question. And something that I'll add is, I think too, people are experts in their own experiences, right? So a lot of times, like impacted community members that like we work with, like Kelsey and I work with a larger organization, so we're not as grassroots as say Ben or other people, but a lot of times community members know what they're experiencing. They know that their health is being impacted. They know that, the noise or the light is keeping them up at night. They know that something is going on and they just don't have the resources to know how to respond to it. And so a lot of times, like our role really is to come in and provide people with the resources to, track the air monitors, or to put air monitors in track concerns, or to put, sound monitors in, or to tell them like how to contact their state legislators, or like what the actions are or the legal recourse is. And I think it's important, specifically when we're doing a lot of this organizing work, to really focus on the fact that like, people are experts in their experience, and it's not our job to come in and tell them like your health is being impacted and blah, blah, blah. Like most of the time people know that and they just don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, to add to that, something like so important in organizing, a lot of times, like especially like in like smaller communities, like there can be a very like close-knit culture of like information sharing in the community, but oftentimes too in these situations, because the narrative around the economic benefit to the region is so strong, people don't realize that there oftentimes are a lot of people in a community who maybe don't like the facility, but they don't want to say that because they don't want to be like get pointed out as the bad guy and against jobs in their community. And so doing this organizing work can help bring together residents who are thinking the same way, who don't want the facility in their community, but just weren't connected to one another and empowered to come together and realize that.
If I could add one more point, that narrative is also propagated by the industry. We found that a lot of the local newspapers, the local TV stations, receive huge donations from the oil and gas and petrochemical industries, which makes it really hard to get our side of the story, our version of this narrative out there. A lot of our work is writing letters to the editor and op-eds in local newspapers, and we find that often, our perspective isn't published, or it's kind of contextualized with a perspective from the industry that just kind of completely discounts everything that we just said at the end of our letter. So it's hard work, and yeah, and thank you, Kelsey and Kelly, for helping me out on that.
So there's a great disparity between the two sides economically. How, Ben, are you guys? How is the climate reality, the program with Kelly and Kelsey and Mary? How are you funded?
Donors. Different. There's relationships with and grants. So I'm funded through grants that Buckeye Environmental Network receives, and I think same with Ben and Yeah. But one, I would like you all, even in Cincinnati, to consider yourselves impacted, right? Our special water filter in Cincinnati is not going to save us. It will not protect us from radioactive waste that will go into the river. It's not protecting us from the PFAS that from dark waters. It is not. We are impacted, and we have the work that I'm doing with Kelly and Ben and Kelsey is we are coming together to mobilize this whole river. I put a link, impactsofplastic.com. It's a to Z series. Our new series is going to be directly uplifting all the communities that are impacted. And so we would like to see everybody kind of understand that you are, just because Kelly and Kelsey and Ben are upriver, you know, we're all impacted together, and we have to have that mindset, and we have to understand that if we're going to even get anywhere, you know. So, you know, I hope you can come away with that understanding that we are impacted. We're maybe not the exact same way, but we are.
And we're impacted in Northern Kentucky, and 5 million people who get the drinking water from the Ohio River, all up and down the river. We're all impacted.
I have I guess more of an observation, but it seems like we have to show the disconnect from what our political leaders are doing. I don't see where they're supporting their citizens at all. It's more corporations. And it seems like that has to be a part of any publicity campaign that's done, to show people, if we could even track and show the money, so to speak, follow the money trail of the politicians that are supported financially by these. I know it's a well-kept secret, but it's got to be there somewhere where we can start naming the people that are supporting corporations as opposed to their citizens' health. It just seems like that would be beneficial.
One thing that is I'll just make a quick observation that is I think part of why we were excited to host this Awaken Act series, and I know we haven't yet touched on, you know, every social justice issue, but, you know, follow the money is like the answer to almost every issue, right? Like these same legislators who are being propped up by these companies, we know that there are also plenty of legislators being propped up by the NRA, and they're receiving donations from them, and that's why they continue. So I think, yeah, like the money is so much the answer. And Susan, I know, like, at least on an individual level, divesting, even if my own personal divestment is not huge, is still something that at least limits their ability to continue to support those people. So yeah, I'm curious, Linda, to just echo your question again. Any of the organizers on this call know of any efforts to try and expose like where that money is coming from and how to change that narrative?
Linking what you're saying, Jesse, about our individual responsibility in our use of plastic. I read somewhere too that part of the difficulty the petrochemical industries are having with their proposed projects is that the price of single-use plastic is down, so they're not making as much money. And also the efforts of people using, you know, to try to use less plastic, having some impact also on their decision making. So we can, you know, we can take a little bit of credit there for doing what we're doing in the sense of using less plastic.
There's two angles to this power thing that we're talking about. You know, the follow the money. The power is in influencing politicians and governments and industry because of money. And that's important, and we have to work on that level. But the other power is people power, and multiplying the number of people who are aware of and becoming educated on this. And this event tonight is part of the education. One of the things, in addition to being a strong advocate for IJPC, another parallel organization that many of you in the Cincinnati area are probably well aware of is the Green Umbrella, and their Faith Communities Go Green is a group within that I'm also part of, and they're also working on trying to influence faith communities to educate their congregations. And that, so you multiply all of those people who are learning not only about the political end where they can petition their legislators and who they vote for, but they use their money in their purchases, not just an individual, but the collective, you know, of multiplying lots of people not using single-use plastics, because in their churches and synagogues and temples, they're being educated as to the dangers and the risks. So I think it's a combination on working both ends. Our strength is the people power, I think.
Wanted to ask Guy if he wanted to share anything. You know, I consider Guy Jones, you know, a mentor and just someone that is able to lead us. They're the original leaders of all this work, and where a lot of what we're doing stems from. So honored to be just in the same space with you, Guy, if you wanted to share anything.
Well, I really don't have anything to share, because everybody has kind of touched on something, and everybody's headed in the right direction. And I mean, you know, it's like, you know, there was one lady that I'm trying to remember her name here. She mentioned about rights of nature. And one of the things is that, and, you know, people talked about responsibility. You know, we have responsibility. You know, the last lady talked about the churches getting involved. And that's one of the things, is because, like, even at that, you know, in my area, I live in Dayton, and those members of the Abrahamic faith, you know, because, you know, they have that's a tremendous forum right there. But, you know, one of the things is that it's, but we have to be mindful of the fact that, you know, the Abrahamic faiths are suffering as well because of the number of attendants. So it was, attendance has been going down even before COVID, and it's gone down even further. But still, we need to keep that up, because when we talk about rights and responsibility, that's an avenue with which we have to begin to look at. You know, it's here we live in a system that is basically, it's a system of laws, and this system of laws recognizes the rights of corporations. And, you know, what is it, Susan, I think it was, somebody had mentioned about people power. You know, it's time that people reclaim that and reclaim that power, in a sense, and begin to advocate and push for that, in a sense that, you know, to make certain that we too, we have rights. We have, you know, our children have rights, our grandchildren have rights to live. And, you know, and it's like, and that touches on a number of things. Not only is it just environmental, but it's also human rights. You know, it's about social justice. You know, it's about, you know, living a life, in a sense, and also too, in a sense that we need to begin to really emphasize on personal responsibilities. And, you know, and it's like, yes, you know, yes, it may be one straw, but when you multiply that, the overall impact that it has. And I mean, you know, so that we need to begin to look at things from a positive sense, and so that we, as, you know, we can continue to move forward. And we are, because right now, at this very moment, there's people are looking back, you know, and you hear this all the time, you know, it's like, you know, get back to normal. That was never normal. We're on the cusp and the doorstep of a totally new society. And a lot of people, you know, and there was one of the young ladies says, you know, we don't know. We don't know, but we now have the ability to create a just society. And, you know, and we as the people have to step forth and begin to make those changes. And, you know, and it's like, and we can go and do that. We can begin to advocate. But, and, you know, it was, somebody brought up the thing about, you know, people don't know. And the reality is that people don't know. And those that do know, ignore it because, you know, it's there. The main thing about the brain serves one purpose. Well, it serves several purposes, but that's one of its main purposes is to survive. And so these individuals who know these facts, they're still thinking about surviving. How am I going to pay the rent? How am I going to pay my utility bills, my car, my house, my clothes, food, all of these things? You know, so they're in that mode. And so, you know, it's like to be concerned about plastics or concerned about this fracking going on or this fracking waste, that's not high on their priority. But we need to go and we need to bring that out to the forefront and to continue to go and see how we are all impacted and how all of these dots are connected. But, you know, it's, everybody's doing great. I heard somebody say about bringing all of these organizations together. It's like, yes, do please, because people coming together is, you know, that's important. Communities are important. You know, neighborhoods are important. You know, we need to begin to, you know, take the time to talk to your neighbor. You know, take the time to let it out there. And it's amazing in the sense that how we can, once we reclaim these communities and begin to build communities, how we can go and begin the impact that we can have. You know, and it's like, I was on a call this morning with some people in New Zealand, and we were talking about responsibilities. And that's, you know, and that's one of the things, and when I hear this tonight, you know, when I come on here tonight, and it's like responsibility, you know, it's really key to everything. But
thank you so much, Guy, and thanks for being with us tonight. It is 9 o'clock, and I know that we have been having a really great discussion, and I just wanted to go back to the chat. I think there was like a few comments that I just wanted to read out loud for our presenters, if you're interested in answering any of these really quickly. One of them was about, it says, knowing that elections are not the be all of a true democracy. We have city and statewide elections approaching. I'm curious if there are efforts to push candidates to clarify their positions on this issue, and if a sunrise type movement could be a force to educate and mobilize the public and shame any pro-fracking candidates. Then do you know of any efforts like that are happening?
Other than our maybe trying to get our brine resolution passed, you know, there's only so much time in a day and so much you know, it's like we're constantly just putting out these fires around all these issues and these permits, and you know, so I think there are organizations that are working on that, but I'm not aware of that. We're kind of have a different focus. So.
And then the other, and I'm sure maybe like if anyone's really interested in that question, you could try and do some research and find the right person, or maybe any of the organizers could put you in touch with the right person. And then the other two questions that I think are good to close for the evening are about some of the actions that we can take. So the anti-protester bills, and those bills are bills that everyone in the social justice community is concerned about. They're not environmental justice specific bills necessarily, right? They're anyone who's protesting anything is going to be impacted. So IJPC's definitely been keeping our eye on them and hoping that they don't pass. And if it looks like they're going to be getting attention, I think we'll for sure start mobilizing folks. But Ben or Kelly or Kelsey or Mary, if you want to tell us more about those bills, that would be wonderful, as well as the current status of the plant proposed for Salem, and what steps we can do to limit that.
Trying to go, Ben? You look like you're going to say something.
Sorry, go ahead, Mary, if you wanted to.
Yeah, I unfortunately don't know a lot of the specifics about each of those bills, but I can send you information, and that one, the link to the Facebook page should have more information. Basically, just a synopsis from what I understand is, you know, these protests will give the power to the police, and they can decide if your protest is illegal. And once it's determined like a legal protest, then that's when you can, you know, all these felonies and all these charges can be brought upon. And so, and it's a very subjective, and it's very like, you know, just even throwing confetti can be considered, you know, illegal, make your protest illegal if they decide, you know. So it's just and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Like there's so much damaging and I apologize because my brain is just not functioning very well. I'm having a hard time finding words. So it's just very broad. It's very all-encompassing. It's like they're trying to find any and every way they can to take our power away and make it so that we don't have a voice, and we cannot confront any of the injustices at all. So, but I can send you more information. And what was there was a second part to that question? Oh, the Salem. That so there's about 26 of these different facilities that are part of the petrochemical hub. And that one that's going to be, I think it was just north of Cincinnati. That one that would be years coming, you know, if hopefully it will never happen, but if it does, it will be years down the line, because they're, from what I understand. And so, but it's pretty concerning, right? The fact that it will be just north of Cincinnati. So.
We had a bill in the Kentucky legislature like that too, protecting the police from the protesters, I guess, letting the police decide what the protesters can do and cannot do. And, you know, the ability to criminalize whatever they do. It's really sad. It's like our democracy is being ripped out of.
It's a very slippery slope, Mary Joyce. Very
terrible.
It's something like that.
Yeah.
There was something that was introduced today, Mary Joyce. I got it. Somebody sent me a message and said, look what Kentucky's doing. So I haven't investigated as to what exactly was introduced in Kentucky, but something happened down there.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible.
Well, we are almost 10 minutes over, and I'm so grateful that everyone has stuck around, but I do want to just be respectful of our presenters' time and everyone's time. It was a really great conversation, and I'm so grateful to Ben and Kelly and Kelsey and Mary for shedding some light on this, because I only knew a very little bit about what was happening. So thank you very much to everyone who's interested in taking some of the action steps that our presenters mentioned. I will send a comprehensive email that is easy to follow that you can use to try and get involved and follow the links to some of those actions. And I'll also attach the PowerPoint. And I'll attach our presenters' emails, if that's okay, in case anyone wants to learn more.
Yeah, Ben did put the link about the protest bells
Protest
in the
bells.
chat. So
Great.
So before we sign off, I just want to make a comment. This is Jessie's last Zoom with us. She is leaving, heading on to law school. She has been outstanding. Let's give her a high five. It's
yeah,
for all you've done, for your intellect, for your passion. We wish you only the best. Keep bringing your wonderful ideas even after you become so knowledgeable in law.
Thank you so much, Paul. What a good final event to be a part of for our NBA team. This was really great.
yeah. Go get him, Jesse.
Alrighty, well, it's been such a wonderful evening. Again, thanks for coming, and
Thanks to the presenters.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.